Thank you very much, Paul. Good to be back. I was actually living in London in 2011 when I stumbled across Bitcoin. It was on a holiday in California, though. But many of my formative conversations and early conversations about Bitcoin and blockchains were here in London. It's good to be back. Good to meet you, Paul. Thank you for the invitation. So. Monerium as a company was founded in 2015 with the purpose of bridging fiat and blockchains. It was just after Ethereum was launched. And I'm going to describe to you how we now just launched a service we call e-money for online transactions, which are powered by blockchains. So I'm guessing which button to push. There you go. So it's appropriate to start at the beginning of everything with the Genesis slide. Genesis 1.1 or 1:1, as it were, fiat blockchain. Blockchains are like any form of data ledger or any form of money, a human construction. And we owe what we're doing today to two, shall we say, creators, Satoshi Nakamoto, who described in a 2008 white paper how you could move electronic cash on the internet for online payments from one party to another without going through a financial institution. So this is peer-to-peer payments. But for that purpose, for his protocol, or her protocol, or their protocol, they invented their own token, which we all know, which is called Bitcoin. Now, a few years later, Vitalik Buterin showed us how we could not just use blockchains to send embedded tokens, but also how we could issue our own tokens linked to any asset of our choice and programmed to transact using programs of our own creation on a blockchain that he and his co-founders decided to call Ethereum. So it's in the wake of that Monerium was formed. My colleague Jon Eilson and co-founder, chairman of Monerium, is at the back of the audience. Jon at the time was serving as the chair of the supervisory board of the Central Bank of Iceland. And I was a Bitcoin hacker that had just moved back to Iceland, as it were. And we thought it would be a very intriguing question to consider how we could actually come from the opposite side and represent legitimate, or shall we say, official money on the blockchain and move it back and forth. Just like people then moved back and forth Bitcoin. So the problem is essentially that we agreed with the picture that was drawn at the time by Richard Gendel Brown, was that there really is no reliable digital currency, or there was no reliable digital currency that we could find or identify. So the current banking system is a big blob of commingled assets and liabilities that sort of move around in unpredictable ways using expensive and slow channels. And we thought we might start with a fresh mind, in spite of our prejudices, try to clear our minds and be as open as possible about how we could build the most robust and the most reliable form of fiat and represent it on a blockchain. Now our solution, which has taken some time, not to identify, but to get authorized by the appropriate regulators, is e-money. Now, we did extensive research, not just as part of our task, which our initial task was to write a commissioned report for a licensed financial institution, which we presented to that financial institution in May 2016. It was called Blockchain and the Future of financial services. What we did identify, we discussed the properties of various blockchains at the time and discussed the pros and cons, and also discussed the pros and cons of various licensing schemes. In our view, being located in the middle of the Atlantic, in Reykjavik, in Iceland, which is affiliated with the EU without being in the EU, but it has still strong ties to the United States. We were at the best possible place looking to both sides of the Atlantic for appropriate licensing scheme. And it turned out that we found one in Europe called e-money, which has been in existence and in use for almost 20 years. It's a proven and technically neutral regulatory framework. It has about euro 12 billion in issue in the Eurozone alone and growing on different types of media, technical media though, prepaid cards mostly. And it meets also the criteria for reliable digital money outlined, for example, by the IMF in a recent report on digital money published in July, in that it has segregated, unencumbered, high-quality liquid assets. And it also requires minimum capital and is supervised and redeemable on demand. In our view, this is the closest possible proxy you can get for digital fiat without having central bank money directly. Just like the Americans invented the internet, which we all use and love, and just like the Europeans invented the GSM standard, which we all use and love, we believe that the best possible framework for digital fiat exists in Europe, and there's no need to reinvent one. Some central banks even allow deposits from e-money issuers. Now, how did we get here? I've already touched upon this very briefly. We started in first principles, coming from the fiat side. We met with the Bank of England. The old lady of Threadneedle Street had then undergone what could potentially be described as a facelift. But with Mark Carney, there was lots of new people there thinking interesting thoughts, which they very kindly shared with us about the usability of blockchains in traditional financial services. We went to the cousins on the other side of the Atlantic. We did a collaboration with Consensus when Consensus was still 2 dozen people in Brooklyn without desks. Completed our report for the financial institution, but since shall we say, it was a bit too novel for our clients, so we decided to become a financial institution ourselves and start issuing fiat money on blockchain. 2 of our co-founders and 1 of our early employees there, senior developer, we showed up at the Financial Authority in Iceland in April 2018 with 600 pages of application material, printed processes, protocols. Code is law, so somebody said, famous person, professor at Harvard, but law is also protocol. So we essentially merged the two, just like Satoshi in the beginning merged public key cryptography with one-way functions. We, shall we say, we took a leaf from his or her or their book and tried to find the best protocol for fiat, digital fiat, and mash it up with what we considered then to be, and what we consider still to be a leading blockchain, Ethereum. We took a seed investment from some investors, institutional and private investors, and we have presented at various conferences that sort of bit under the radar though. We've been busy working, but now, in about a year after we submitted our application, the regulator granted us an e-money license, the first in the world for issuing e-money on blockchains. Thank you. So we are now opening for business gradually. We had a closed beta in the summer, and just announced yesterday, I believe, together with TradeShift. There's Mats from TradeShift Frontiers. He's there in the audience. We announced the first B2B use case for e-money on blockchains. what we did, we combined our e-money, which resides not in a magnetic card, not in a mobile wallet, but in a smart contract, which really is just like a programmable passport on the mainnets. We matched our smart contract for e-money with Tradeshift's smart contract for e-invoices on the mainnet. And that was a match made, I wouldn't say in heaven, but in a very good place. Because there are two clients who were onboarded on Tradeshift and then were issued e-money for this transaction. One of them commented, the science fiction is when Tradeshift integrates with Monerium. It connects the invoicing, the money, and the inventory. So all of a sudden, we have programmable invoices and programmable e-money on a blockchain. And there's a pipeline of use cases in e-commerce and finance that we're working on. We'll be proud to share with you, hopefully, in the coming weeks and months. Now, we're not alone in believing anymore that fiat and blockchains will be relevant for mainstream markets. The World Economic Forum now believes that blockchains will be relevant for many mainstream sectors and industries and activities, such as supply chains, which Tradeshift is an expert on. Now, the IMF, the report which I previously alluded to, is called Digital Money. It was issued in July of this year. I would highly encourage anybody who's interested in digital money to read it. It's on the website. They actually put this statement in the conjunctive. They said blockchain-based forms of e-money would allow seamless payment of automated transactions, which saves a lot of back office expense and time. And they refer to capital markets. But lo and behold, there was a company out there that alerted them to the fact there was actually an e-money issuer out there that was issuing on blockchain. So we got the privilege of being invited to present at the IMF in September to explain how we were issuing e-money on blockchains. We love crypto, don't misunderstand us, but we believe in yin and yang existing together, fiat and crypto, public money and private. And now we're here in this little sandbox, which represents crypto and blockchains, but we believe for practical purposes, most companies and people will, in the foreseeable future at least, use mostly fiat for most of their expenses and investments. So that's the market that we're serving. We're compatible with all leading blockchains, totally blockchain agnostic, supportive of all of them. And possibly we should have here a chimera of Ethereum and Hyperledger in the light of the events of past few weeks of announcements. Some of these will merge, some of these will borrow from each other. But any of them that catches on in the mainstream we will support in the future. And we're backed on the back end by a cloud-hosted digital banking platform with a blockchain interface, which is audited and compliant, extensible to future services, compatible with any blockchain or any client, and scalable with API access. So this is what we've been building. This is what we've been working on for the past 3 years and some. And happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you very much.